two seekers inspire a sense of the possibility and potential and shape these reflections of mine. The first is an old Sufi who was found scratching through the sand in the middle of the road. "What are you doing, Sufi?" pilgrims asked as they passed him, digging and scratching on their way to the temple. "I'm looking for the treasure I have lost," the old man said. So the pilgrims, good people all, dropped to their knees to help, sifting sand, digging under stones, sweating under the waxing midday sun. Finally, hungry, soaking wet and exhausted, one of the travelers said to him at last, "Sufi, are you sure you lost your treasure here?" And the old man said, "Oh, no, I didn't lose my treasure here. I lost it over there on the other side of those mountains." "Well, if you lost it on the other side of the mountains," the people shouted at him, "why, in the name of God, are you looking for it here?" The old man said, "I'm looking for it here because there is more light here." My second guide through the complexities of this question is the seeker who asked the Holy One, "How are we to seek union with God?" And the Holy One said, "The harder you seek, the more distance you create between God and you." "Then what does one do about the distance?" the disciple persisted. And the Holy One said, "Understand that it isn't there." "But does that mean that God and I are one?" the seeker asked. And the Holy One said, "Not one, not two." "But how is that possible?" the seeker said. And the Holy One said, "The sun and its light, the ocean and the wave, the singer and his song, not one, not two. What I have learned about God after a lifetime of seeking is that first, God must be sought in the light. And that second, God does not have to be found." With Joan's words in mind, we light our chalice today in recognition that whatever we seek it in the light and in the context of connection.
And in the spirit of that connection, the light from our chalice will be sent off with our children as we sing them on their way. Hello, welcome once again. I am Sopia McKean and I'll be your worship associate for today's service. So, a service about God. In some churches that would be a redundancy, but in this church we often go whole services without the word God ever getting mentioned. I wanted to talk about God because I grew up in this church where we talked openly about many different things. It was here as a teenager that I attended the Owl Sex Education program, which was much more comprehensive than the programs offered in public school. But we rarely talked about God, which left me as an adult wondering what my concept of what my relationship to God is. I'm a UU, so of course I wanted to ask other people, well, what is your concept of God and how does it inform mine? And how do we find that space in between our two concepts, which is maybe where God really and truly is, if God is anywhere. There's no doubt in my mind that each of us here has our own very individual relationship to the idea of God, as we do to any of the ideas we explore together each Sunday. Some of us might see God as an extension of the UU belief in the inherent worth and dignity of each person, might see, as the Quakers do, God in everyone. Some of us might see God in nature, out in the trees and bird calls and mountain lakes of our home. Some of us might find God in the pages of the Torah. Some of us might see multiple gods in the pagan rituals of solstice celebrations and the calling in of the four directions. Some of us might not find exactly God, but maybe the spirit of life in quiet meditation or in the energy of a room like this one, where we have come very purposefully to be together. And some of us may have been harmed by the idea of God, had people or religions in our past which use God to limit or shame us. This service is an exploration, a conversation. There's no right answer, and that is not the goal. Some of us may never find an idea of God resonant, and we will never all agree. Today, we're having a tapestry of faith service, so we'll hear from 3 different people in the congregation about their own relationships to the concept of God. I'll invite each of us here today to put on our universal translators, so to speak. So if certain specific words, like maybe God, don't sing for you, I invite you to look past the specific verbiage to the meaning underneath, to what ideas or feelings do spark. I'm interested in the concept of God personally as a way of naming that which is larger than myself. We as UUs are very good at affirming the inherent worth and dignity of each person. That means we often see not the church, not any scripture, but each individual as a vibrant and important locus of truth. But that leaves us with a conundrum. If I affirm my individual truth and I affirm yours, and if they're different, then where does that get us? To the space in between. Not that I've got God all figured out, far from it. But for me, when I think of God, I often think of in-between spaces. In between the known and the unknown, in between my truth and yours. God, for me, is to reach out for things beyond myself. There are so many things about the universe. Death, black holes, why we can't get a particular song out of our head for weeks on end, that we as humans may never fully understand, but we keep reaching for that understanding anyway. Similarly, I could probably talk to each of you for hours on end about your individual relationship to God and still never be able to fully know all the complexities of your truth outside of my own. God, for me, puts a name to that. God, for me, is both a humbling reminder of the limits of my understanding of the universe and others, and a joyous affirmation in that innately human need to reach out towards that understanding anyway. Come, let us reach out, let us worship together.
God is no noun, and certainly not an adjective. God is at least a verb, and even that shrinks her. God is not so much a woman as she resides in the improbable hope of brown mothers. God is not so much a man as he is at work in the memory of my grandfather's laugh. God is not trans. God swims in the tears of the one who sees her real self, at long last in the bathroom mirror. God is not black, neither is he white. God is waiting in the contradiction of songs from slave shacks. And I have seen God in the alabaster smiles of children at play. We're getting Michelangelo all wrong. God is not the bearded one surrounded by angels floating over the Sistine. He is not Adam with his muscle back pressing the earth. No, God is the closing inch of space between their reaching fingers. Don't believe for a moment that God is Catholic. For God's sake, he isn't even human. Have you heard the wood thrush when the sun glistens on the Huron? Can you see the flowers, how they speak to bees without a word? Still, God is no spring blossom, no wood thrush. God is neither the sun nor the bee. God is what you see in the blossom. God is what you hear in the river, and suddenly discover how much of it is a part of you. To be clear, God is not you. God is somewhere in the 14 billion years which have come to mean that you are. God is, after all, at least a verb. She is neither Pharaoh's rod nor Moses' staff. We must be the ones to cease our slavery. She is not interested in blame, nor does she offer praise. Truth, gratitude are ours to breathe. She will not have your answers. She's too large for answers. She dances too wildly to be fastened to them. And answers are nouns anyway. God is at least a verb. Twirling in the radiant reds of spring blossoms, singing in the rare silences between rapid opinions, attending the tears of dark-skinned deaths, and learning in tiny alabaster smiles. God is waiting in the space between fingers that might connect. He is waiting for us to stop naming her. She is waiting for us to see all of him. God is waiting to be unshrunk.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Tracy Pepper. When I was asked to share my concept of God, it was a time I was planning to travel. I was getting everything ready. A lot of things were going on. And of course, whenever UUCM reaches out, my answer is yes. So I said yes. And then as things calmed down, I began to really think about, wow, it's the concept of God, because it's so personal. How do you really articulate that to someone? So I began by thinking, because my concept of God has evolved as I've gotten older and lived life, I started to think about what God is not first. And I was raised in a situation in church where it was a punishing God, and there was fire and brimstone, and it was a scary God to me as I was growing up. And as I lived my life, I realized that that is not so. That's not what I know. That's not my personal God. And I thought, okay, let me try to explain it this way. Some of you are Facebook friends with me, and you know, if you are, that I have an avatar. I created this avatar to look as much like me as possible. In fact, if you were to see my avatar, I have the same hat, the same blouse, I dress the same way my avatar is. I could have just as well created myself as a white person, as a man. I could have had on a hijab, I could have had on a turban, I could have presented myself in any way that I wanted to. But the reality is, I'm still Tracy. I am still the source, no matter how I appear. And that's how I see God. God, the word G-O-D, God, to me is too small to encapsulate. What I see is the source of life, of love, of energy. And that is a source that I hold on to. So when I say God, because it's something maybe that I was, taught as a child, oh God, or dear Lord, that's something that's sort of cultural and nurture. But in my heart, there is a source, and my idea is that that source is within me, and that source is within every living thing.
Yes, that's right.
That source gives me strength, gives me courage, and I can imagine in any given situation, whatever I need that source to look like. If I'm in a situation where I feel I need my ancestors to help me out, then that's what God looks like to me. If I am in a place where I just really need to soak in nature or soak in the laughs of my grandchildren, that is God to me. I believe, like I said, that innately whether we recognize it or not, I think that we know innately that we are connected to this source, and that source is us. In terms of the punishment and the rewards, I don't think that God punishes, and I don't necessarily think that God rewards. What I do know is that I have an opportunity. I can punish myself by not doing the things that keep me centered into that source. That's how I punish myself. If I'm not meditating, if I'm not doing the things, if I'm not being grateful, all those things that I know and feel that keep me really centered and in that source, then I get punished, my life doesn't go as well. When I am doing those things that I know, that I feel keep me close to that source, that light, that energy, God, she or he, however you want to visualize or your own concept, then my life goes a little better. So if God is the source, and the source is with all of us, then the extension to that, to me, is very clear that we are God. And that is what allows me to get up in the morning, to make my day, whether I'm having a wonderful day or a bad day, as long as I have that higher power that I call the source, that I can count upon, then everything will be okay. And you might ask, well, do you see God? I know I feel God. I feel God every day. Do I see God? I see God every day. Every time I choose to look, I see it in the faces of my grandchildren. I see it in my children. I see it in my friends and my loved ones. I see it in nature. I see it in butterflies. I see it everywhere. Now, I go from, throughout any particular day, I may feel distant from God, or I may feel close, but it has nothing to do with that source at all. That source is there for me to take advantage of and to enjoy and to use. I am the one who decides how close or how far away from that. And until another revelation comes from me from the source, that is my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Oh, yeah. All right. So now is the time in our service that we set aside for the Unitarian ritual of joys and sorrows. So in a minute, I'm going to invite people in the room to come forward if they'd like and place a stone in the water representing what it is that we're carrying in our hearts today. For people on Zoom, you're invited to type in the chat, and if you'd like to just place a 0 or an O to represent a stone, an unspoken joy or sorrow, you can do that as well. And I'll invite us to all just really hold one another in this time together. And I invite people who would like to step forward. I've placed a few final stones in the water to represent those joys and sorrows that remain unspoken in our hearts.
Good morning. My name is Jo Waters, and I feel like a lot of what I have to say has been said, but I'm going to say it again, and maybe it'll be in a slightly different way, and hopefully be useful. It certainly was useful to me to have the opportunity to put all of this thought into the topic of my conception of God, my perspective of God, and I really appreciated having this opportunity to write it down. And with only 5 minutes, it's going to be brief, but here we go. So I've actually never believed in God, at least not the Christian bearded man in the sky, God. My dad found God in nature, especially the granite and lakes of the Desolation Wilderness. And he took me backpacking actually before I could walk. And I was always grateful for that. It's no surprise that my first religious experience was while backpacking in the Trinity Alps as a teenager. And this sense of nature as sacred has never left me. Then, as a college student, I had another transcendent experience in a very different way while reading the Tao Te Ching. It was really powerful, so powerful I've never really been able to adequately talk about it. The Tao that can be named is not the eternal Tao. But I was left with a very strong sense that what is important in life is the present moment, and only the present moment. The now is all there is, and therefore, why should I ever choose to be unhappy? And that stayed with me for longer than you might think. But as with all revelation, it's hard to maintain. In general, though, I did find myself very drawn to the Eastern faiths of Taoism and Buddhism, in which there is no God, there is no deity. The Dalai Lama calls himself a non-theist, and I'm very drawn to that concept. But more recently, I found myself approaching the topic of God from a very different angle, a more utilitarian angle. A year ago, I joined a 12-step program for food addiction. And I didn't know anything about 12 steps, and I didn't know what that meant, and so it's all been quite educational. And part of the program of being in 12 steps is praying. And I was told that I needed to pray in order to find recovery. And that was just a completely foreign topic to me. I didn't know what prayer meant. I mean, I knew what it meant, but I'd never done it. I didn't know what it felt like or what it was supposed to do, and I was very resistant. It took me a long time to be willing to do it. But I was seeing results in the program, and I wanted results, and so I decided to try. Like, okay, I'll try praying. And I quickly realized that it's really difficult to pray if you don't know who or what you're praying to. So I started exploring what kind of a God or higher power would make sense to me. And many of you know I've identified as a pagan for most of my adult life. And I thought, well, okay, maybe nature or Gaia could be my higher power. But my paganism has mainly been about celebrating seasonal change. And while I like being able to put faces on some of these celebrations, think Brigid, Lugh, Persephone, the Green Man, it didn't seem big enough to be my higher power. Life now, with a capital L, that is an undeniably great power, very drawn to that. And some of you may remember that in my last testimonial several years ago, I talked about finding the power of love in this church, also love with a capital L also. So I decided to start praying to the Spirit of life and the Spirit of love. It helps that we UUs already pray to these spirits, most especially with our beloved hymn 123, the Spirit of Life, which I think is coming up, which I didn't know when I wrote this, by the way. I found that for me, God is not a personal God, not a God with a face and a will and a plan and pronouns. My higher power is an impersonal force, like gravity, and equally irresistible. My higher power is an energy that permeates everything, everywhere, all at once. You may ask, what does it look like to pray to an impersonal force? Surprisingly, it actually looks a lot like praying to a personal God, a God with a face, and it works the same way too. And I thought I'd end with an example of something that has been meaningful to me in my 12-step exploration. Because in all 12-step programs, there is a lot of what I call God talk. And it can be a little off-putting to someone like me, who doesn't believe in that kind of a God. But I have taken to doing what I call translation from the wording in the literature I've been reading. And I found that all the prayers that I encounter in my reading work just as well when translated and addressed to my impersonal higher power. And so I just thought I'd end with this little example. The third step of the 12, some of you may know this step. The original wording is, be prepared, God talk. We made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. I struggled with that. But in translation, when I substitute the spirit of life and love for the concept of God, I end up thinking of myself as a conduit for these energies. And my job, my only job, is to try to be in alignment, in harmony with these energies. Because I know, as Tracy said, that good things are more likely to happen when I go with the flow instead of resisting or fighting the flow. And when I am aligned with these energies, it amplifies them. This is my belief. It amplifies them and allows me to bring more life and more love into the world. And why should I ever not say yes to that?
Thank you, Joe. So this is our opportunity to say yes together, and we will come out of this meditation singing Spirit of Life. It's not an accident that we're here today. What I mean is, every Sunday when we fill this church, it is because we have all chosen to come together to make this space sacred with our presence and with our intention. I invite us to get comfortable in our chairs, close our eyes if we'd wish. As we enter into a time of meditation and prayer, I'll invite us to call more of that sacred presence into the room with us, whatever that might mean for you. That sacred presence might be God. It might be the loving awareness of your community surrounding you. It might be the rhythm of your own breathing and clear intention to be present with yourself. I invite us to find and focus on what it is our sacred presence is this morning, that we might fill the room with the tapestry of what we hold holy and be more fully with each other and in the world this morning as we enter into silence.
My name's Diana Gibson, and most of you don't know me. Since I'm going to be talking about God, I want to begin by emphasizing my deep appreciation and delight in the previous services we've had recently on Buddhism and humanism. And I've been intrigued by both the commonalities and the differences, and I love it. And I also want to say thank you to Tracy and Joe, who I've lost there, Joe, for your beautiful and really authentic expressions that, again, are intriguing and nurturing for me. I can't talk about God without talking about myself, because all I have are experiences of the divine. And I come from a fairly traditional background. But even as a child, I had a hard time with the idea of God as a harsh judge. It didn't make any sense with the one thing I did know, and that is God is love. So as a child, I developed a kind of Casper the Friendly Ghost image of God. But as my feminist leanings grew, I found myself rejecting the man in the sky, even Casper, because they were male. But was I rejecting God? Was there anything else? This started a spiritual quest, and the next step was seminary. There, I was surprised, shocked even, to discover radical feminist theologians, hadn't known they existed, and mainline biblical scholars both who affirmed feminine images of God. It's quite out there. Of course, God is no more literally female than God is literally male. God in monotheistic religions is transcendent, meaning that God transcends human boxes and boundaries and binaries. For those of you who are familiar, think of the first story in Genesis, where God created human beings in God's own image, male and female. Biblically speaking, the transcendent one contains both. Maybe they is the most adequate pronoun we can have for a personal God. It's worth noting that this idea of the transcendence of God, meaning that God is beyond human comprehension and categories, is really very orthodox in monotheistic religions. Islam has 99 names for God, reflecting the rich and varied attributes of the divine. But why not 100? Because Muslims know that there is always more of God than humans understand. In the Christian tradition, we can go back to Augustine, trying to emphasize God's mysterious transcendence and reminding humans that we can never fully grasp or define, heaven forbid, literally, God. Augustine said, if you think you have understood, then that which you have understood is not God. As Joe and Tracy have said, however, God is obviously more than the anthropomorphic images that we often hear. God is light, strength, hope, solidarity. And God is also, for me, intimately within us, like Tracy was saying, intimately close. God is breath, life, a magnet in my heart, love. And as the reading Shanti said, and I had this before I heard that, and I hadn't heard it before, God is not just a noun, God can be a verb. And I usually find that verb is love. I now teach religious studies at Santa Clara University, which is a Jesuit college. And when my students say they don't believe in God, I reply, tell me about the God you don't believe in. For my students, that God is usually the omnipotent, interventionist, anti-science, puppeteer man in the sky. Or sometimes it's the Santa Claus they've outgrown. And I assure them that I don't believe in that God either. The harsh judge, the vending machine, or Santa Claus God, even Casper the Friendly Ghost, are woefully inadequate for our adult selves in this complex world with so much suffering and pain. Those of us who find meaning in God and seek more meaning in God find ways to liberate our experiences of the divine, like we've heard today, to liberate those in ways that are authentic and life-giving for our own true lived experience. I'm going to close with 3 examples of how that's been true for me. There have been times in my life when I urgently needed courage, more courage than I had. And when I found that courage, I experienced it as holy, as that of God in me. There are times in my life where I desperately need wisdom, and I'm certain more wisdom than I possess. And when that wisdom comes, I see it as the spark of the divine alive in me. There are times in my life when I profoundly need strength or hope or compassion far beyond my capacity. And when I find those, I'm convinced that they are from a source beyond my own self. And I name that source God, for lack of a better name, I guess, because it connects me to my tribe, I guess. That of God in me, the transcendent mystery that is love, that is at work in my own being. For me, that is both humbling, as Sopia said at the beginning of the service, and liberating. Thank you.
I always love these Tapestry of Faith services where we get to hear the beautiful and varied reflections of many people in our community and see all the ways they interweave. To me, it's a living out of our values, forefronting the collaborative and collectivist spirit that I love in Unitarian Universalism. The affirmation of how each of our individual threads of truth interweave into the tapestry of our church. The offering, too, is an opportunity for us to live our values. It is another among many ways in which we are reminded of how we come together as a community to grow and sustain this church, a weekly ritual in which we are afforded the opportunity to give whatever it is each of us is called to give. 50% of our offering this month will support Bright Futures for Youth, whose mission is to ignite the potential of youth today for vibrant communities tomorrow. Among other work, they offer targeted supportive services for LGBT and homeless youth in the community. Up on the screen are other ways to give. I now invite the ushers to come forward and accept today's offering. Thank you for your generosity. We dedicate our offering today to the seeking of truths larger than ourselves and to the children who will continue our seeking after us. And I want to thank all the people that helped put this service together today. It's always, the tapestry services are a special favorite of mine because I feel like I'm just shepherding a larger whole, which is how services should always be. Thank you so much to Shanti and Beth for the wonderful readings, and thank you to Diana and Tracy and Joe for their sharing. Thank you to Gabrielle for the piano, to Claire and Cypress and Bob for our AV. Thank you to Shanti also for the setting, and our greeters, Carl and Laura. Thank you to Michael and Keith, Susan, and the Monday Soul Matters Circle for our refreshments today, and Linda and Cheryl for being up with our kids this morning. All right, we got some announcements. Reverend Kevin is on vacation until Tuesday, July 3rd, so you can contact admin at UU Grass Valley in the meantime. We have the Pride Family Potluck coming up on July 26th at 6 p.m. We have a spirituality sharing circle on Saturday, June 27th at 2 p.m. Oh, July, sorry. We have Parkinson's Care Partners Support Group on Thursday, July 25th at 10:30 a.m. And you can learn more about those events and many other upcoming events and services at uugrassvalley.org. And I now invite you to stand as you're willing and able and join in singing Immortal Love. In the words of Glenn Thomas Rideout, we're getting Michelangelo all wrong. God is not the bearded one surrounded by angels floating over the Sistine. He is not Adam with his muscled back pressing the earth. No, God is the closing inch of space between their reaching fingers. Let us keep reaching. As we leave here today, we know that we will carry the flame of peace and love until we meet again. Thank you. If you're here in the building, we hope you'll stay and join us for refreshments in the back. And to everyone on Zoom and here, we hope to see you next Sunday for We Are the People. And camping meeting at 12 p.m.